Boom, 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 boom. What's up, guys? Welcome back for yet another episode of the Off Grid Podcast. First of all, just want to say thanks so much for all the messages. I've had some incredible messages from you guys from all over the world saying that you're really enjoying this podcast. So thank you. It means a lot to me, particularly considering that this podcast started out basically just being mum and dad, like, keep going, Jakey boy. It's now at the point where there are strangers who don't know me actually listening to this show. And I want to give a special shout out to Donna in New Zealand. Thank you so much for your message, Donna, on Instagram and saying that you love the episode with Kent and Cool. And I hope that you keep enjoying this podcast. It's just, I can't overstate it enough how much it blows my mind that people from all over the world are listening to this show. I just think it's so freaking cool. Yeah, thanks. All right, on with this week's episode. This week, I speak with Preet Chandi, who is a British Army veteran, polar explorer, and 4-time Guinness World Record breaker. She has skied to the South Pole alone 3 times, and sometimes for as long as 70 days, carrying up to 120 kilograms. In this conversation, we talk about what 70 days of complete solitude does to your mind. From British Army to solar polar exploration with no skiing background, how anger can drive momentum without becoming the thing that controls you, why failure on her second expedition built the resilience that made her third expedition a success, and how to take the first step into the expedition world. All right, guys, on with the podcast. Hope you absolutely love this one. Preet's got an incredible energy. And I hope that you guys get to witness that as well. Alrighty, you know what time it is. On with the podcast. Thanks a lot for doing this, by the way, Preet. I'm really glad to get you on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Sorry, my admin on an expedition's pretty good. Everything else, because people will say to me, you must be like super organized, and honestly, it's just a bit manic and everywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, all good. I can imagine it's chaos.
Yeah.
Where I wanted to start is where you started with your polar expeditions and being an explorer, Googling how to get to Antarctica. So I thought we'd go there as the beginning and just see, like, at that time, did you consider yourself an explorer? What was that journey of like becoming an explorer?
No, honestly, I never knew what an explorer was or really an adventurer was growing up. And I found myself doing a little bit more and a little bit more. So when I was at university, I did a half marathon, then a full marathon. And then I found these things called ultra marathons. I was like, oh, what's that? And, entered one and found out. So, and it was almost like I was doing a different challenge each year. I found then a Tough Mudder and just different challenges. And I was one day speaking to my old boss who said, I'm looking for something to do. Maybe it'll be a run on each continent, something endurance related. And he's the one that mentioned Antarctica to me. And I just didn't know anything about it at all. I thought not a chance. Skiing, all of that stuff. I don't know anything about it. And it actually stayed in my mind for about a year without me realizing it. And the appeal to me was how amazing would it be to go and do something you don't know anything about. And that's what, brought me to Googling, how do you get to Antarctica? And it's funny because whenever we start anything new, it's scary. Of course it is. It's the unknown. I still remember writing my first Facebook post about what I wanted to do and being really scared about it because I literally had zero idea. It's not my background. I didn't really know people that had done that kind of thing at all. So the unknown is always scary, but there is so much growth in going into places outside of your comfort zone. And yeah, one step at a time, I, went on to do a few different expeditions.
What was that about the Facebook post? Were you like declaring to the world what you wanted to do?
I was looking for like the name and if anyone had any ideas on sponsorship because, so I wrote on Facebook, I was looking for basically the Polar Preet, Nate, like what should I call social media pages? What website pages, any ideas basically? Does anybody know anyone? And people are great because often there's a connection through a connection. So suddenly people are like, oh, so-and-so, I know this person who knows this person who went to Antarctica. I know this person. So I was speaking to anybody that was pretty much happy to speak to me. And, you know, they say no such thing as a stupid question. So I'm just asking whatever I know. Before I was put in touch with the logistics company in Antarctica, who gave me more information about, you know, how I can start and what training I need to do. Because otherwise, how do you know? It's not exactly a, considered necessarily a normal thing to go and do.
Okay, so when you were doing all of this and you're getting these like incredible connections to all these people and you're putting yourself out there, what was your life situation? Like, how old were you? What sort of experience had you had leading up to that point as well?
So I would say, so my outdoor experience came from the army. So I joined the British Army part-time when I was 19, and that is the first time I ever went camping. You know, that is not something that we used to do. So that's the first time. But what I would say in that experience, it helped a lot because, you know, I spent time in the outdoors and, you know, I dug a hole and then slept in that hole. Like I definitely stepped outside of my comfort zone. But what I realized then when I started looking into expeditions is I had a big gap in my knowledge. For example, clothing. You know, what did I wear when I was with the military? I wore uniform or military clothing. What footwear did I wear? I always wore my military boots, like my Altberg boots. So there was a few gaps there, which is fair enough. And, you know, you learn as you go. But was my intro to the outdoors. And then you learn a bit more every time you do something. When I did this race called Marathon des Sables, and it's 156 miles in the Sahara Desert. And I mention it because it's one that I read about years before I did it. Somebody had bought me the Secret Santa gift, and the book was something like Toughest Challenges. And I remember seeing it thinking, oh my God, this looks insane. And probably fast forward like 8 to 10 years, I actually did it. And you know, what kind of bag do you have? What kind of trainers? Like the gaiters, all of this information that I just didn't know. And even going to that, I was so unprepared. So I didn't take a roll mat because I didn't want to carry extra weight. So I would, tents are at the checkpoints. So I would ask to sleep at the end, and then I'd like roll the rug. So I had like this roll mat. I didn't take a cooker because I thought it's hot anyway. So I'd leave like my bottle of water, I'd cut it and then leave it out in the sun for a little bit and then have this like basically cold meal. I didn't try my food before I went. And I remember having the strawberry milkshake, which was the worst drink I've ever had. So I was so unprepared for the trip. However, what I would say, by the time I got to the start line, I knew I could do it. And that's not because, you know, I wasn't coming anywhere in quickly. However, I knew that I don't have to run it all. I know I could walk, you know, that distance if I needed to. Because for me, once I've gotten to that start line and done all the work to get to the start line, the event itself, that last 6 days, it's almost the end of the event, you know? I've put all the effort into raising money to get to the start line, getting all of my gear, like everything it takes to get to that start line. That isn't the whole story. That's just the last section of the story. And there's no way by the time I've gotten to that section, I'm not making it to the end.
And you've obviously gone to the South Pole now solo 3 times. A lot of the guests that I speak to, they've like done loads of different expeditions around the world. Whereas you seem to be like Polar Preet as well. It's like so like focused on doing this thing. I mean, is it the good food or why is it that you do it so much?
So in the army as well, most things I'd done had been in hotter climates. And when my boss said, what about Antarctica? You know, this huge unknown place, this place I know nothing about. I didn't know people that knew anything about it. So that was the appeal for me. So then I started looking into it and I decided I want to be the first woman to cross the landmass because why not go big, right? So I started doing all this training to try and do that trip. So the logistics company have to say yes because they're the people that drop me on the continent and pick me up. And I did all this training and they actually said no. So the reason I did my first trip, I thought, what can I do now? They've said no. I actually did a slightly smaller trip. I did 700 miles solo to the South Pole. I did that and then came back basically to show I was competent. So I basically had to, you know, my first trip to South Pole, still a huge trip, came back and then attempted to cross the landmass and I didn't. I failed to reach the end. And then I remember that year was a hard year. I was struggling. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if I could get the speed record. And I thought, let's go and try. And no way I'm the best skier or any of that. But one of the biggest lessons I've learned is you don't have to be the best to succeed. So I didn't go into it thinking I'm going to do 3 trips. I wanted to try one. I couldn't do the first one that I wanted. So I changed it, adapted it so that I could do what I wanted. And then after failing quite a big trip and one I didn't expect to fail, I then thought, I wonder if I could get a speed record, which was the same distance as my first trip. And I did, I got it. So it was only ever meant to be once. And then I loved Antarctica is just, I mean, it's an incredible place. And then have gone back to work there. So it's, yeah. And Polar Pre, it was all created for this, to show, I think, somebody like me. And what I mean by somebody like me is who hasn't seen somebody that looks like them in those kind of places, who knew nothing about adventure or exploration, who didn't even know there were no polar bears in Antarctica, because everybody has different baseline knowledge. And I really want to put that out there. You can start from wherever, I cannot even tell you how silly I felt when people would say to me as well, can you believe people don't know there are no polar bears in Antarctica? And now I have much more confidence. I'll say, well, yeah, I didn't know. And, it's not so funny anymore. So I was like, I didn't know, because everybody has different baseline knowledge and we all learn from somewhere. Now I do know. And actually, that's something I educate people on too. And not just kids. A lot of the adults do not know. And that is okay. Most of my community genuinely thought I was going to Southall, not the South Pole. Not even joking. I heard it so many times. So I think education is really important for me. So that's why the 3 times. It was never the plan at the start to just keep going to the South Pole. I want to do a big run across India end of next year. So coming back to the running slowly, which is I need to actually start running again for that.
Okay. Wow. Well, there's a lot. I can tell, like, in your mind, there's always like a lot of adventure going on, and you've always got these ideas happening and stuff like that. How do you decide like which one really calls to you? Because there's so many things that you could do. How do you go, okay, I'm gonna do that?
So I had this, you're going to try and cross a landmass in Antarctica. And what's funny is all of these big trips that I did, in my mind, I would tell myself this is training. And I did some really big trips, like 27 days on a Greenland ice cap, Norway and Iceland. And in my head, I'm like, this is training. Even when I did my first trip, where I became the 9th woman to ski, I think, solo and unsupported to the South Pole, first woman of color to do it, I was still like, this is training to go to the trip that I've been, I'm trying to do. So, and then I didn't make that, which hit me quite hard. So I tried to zone in on that. So even, for example, I know I want to run across India, and I think I've been wanting to do that for a while. I've almost put that on a back burner. I won't let myself plan it too much. If it's in my head for long enough, I think I ask myself why. Why do I want to do this trip? What's the so what? I think there are always the selfish reasons. I 100% want to push my own boundaries. I also want to inspire people, but I'll be honest, there's always that personal reason as well. So what, and then I will prioritize. I think sometimes people might look at what I do and think I'm a little bit, what's the word? Impulsive. I have this idea and I want to do, but there's a lot of like risk management and planning that goes behind it. And I think I get that from my military background. I won't just, well, actually, I think I do. I think I have this crazy idea and then I back it up with planning afterwards. So I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. And it might sound crazy. Is it possible? I have spreadsheets full of the risks of whatever I want to do, plus how to manage that risk, how to mitigate that risk. So there's a lot of planning that goes behind it. But if it's in my mind for long enough and I think it's possible, I'll think, okay, why do I want to do it? How can I do it? Is it possible? Can I get the sponsorship to do it? And that's it. If I put my mind to something, I am probably going to do it.
That's an incredible amount of trust to have with yourself. Like, if you think on a everyday level, the amount of times, and I do as well, where like you'd be like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow, or I'm going to wake up at 7, just like basic stuff, and then you don't do it. It's like, oh, well, now how can you trust yourself? Because you said that you would, and now you haven't.
That's true. But also, if let's say, you don't on that day, I also would say don't ruminate on that, because you will go round in circles. So, okay, I didn't today. What are the reasons I didn't? I didn't put my gym kit out. My alarm didn't go off. Okay, next day I'm going to put my gym kit out in front of me and I'm going to put 3 alarms on. And I'm not going to give myself the excuse, because often, let's say your alarm goes off and it might be I'm just going to snooze for another 10 minutes, or I didn't sleep great last night, or whatever the reason is. So I try to give myself less time for excuses. I was saying this to my niece recently, about getting nervous and talking. I would say to her, count to a number. So for me, it might be 3. And on 3, you do it. You go. You don't give yourself because I'm an overthinker. There's so many people speaking in my mind. It's so busy all the time. So I just have to go and, well, I say stop overthinking. It's still there. And it's not about motivation. It's not about self-belief. Those things come and go. I don't always believe in myself, because if I think back to my first trip, life was busy. I was working, I'm full time in the army. I was a COVID vaccinator. I was trying to do my master's. I was struggling to get sponsorship. I was overwhelmed most of the time. Like, I was struggling most of the time. And if I felt like I was going to break down, which was quite often, I would stop the thing I was doing. Let's say I was studying for my master's and the exams, I'd stop and I'd watch a show for 30 minutes, or I'd stop and I'd go drag my tires around. I was not far from Clapham, so the park around Clapham South for a little bit. So I'd change what I was doing. So, so I'm not having to like mentally focus on something. Sometimes I didn't really have to think much when I'm dragging my tires. I just do that physical work instead. But I've been in those times where it's really, really hard. And actually, I'll come back to them when I'm doing something hard. We often forget where we are now. So I will think back a couple of years ago, you didn't know anything about the South Pole, Preet. You didn't even know there were no polar bears there. Look how far you've come, which can be hard because obviously we're always changing our own goals.
I think you probably have a really great understanding of your mind, because when I was looking through all the expeditions you've done and watching you out there doing the thing, of course, it's like a massive physical feat of endurance. But I was just thinking about the solitude, just the amount of time you would spend with your mind. And that's such a rare thing these days, to have complete solitude with no human contact or, internet notifications and things like that. What have you learned from, what was it, like 70 days at a time? Like, what have you learned from these big stretches of solitude?
So what I'd say is, before I went on my first trip, the longest I'd spent alone, I think, was probably 24 hours. And I've always been somebody that wanted to be surrounded by people. I'm an extrovert. Everything I've ever done in the army, you do it as a team. So I think the reason I wanted to do something solo is I thought, it's going to be much harder. And I tried to, but even things like Marathon des Sables, you enter alone, you're not alone. I'm in a tent full of people, you become friends with them, you're with people on the route. So you're never really alone. And it was hard. I would say I remember the first week of my first expedition, Antarctica, because I had good weather. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. I've got good weather. I'm mentally feeling good. And also there's a lead up, right? So it's a couple of years. So you're finally there. Finally. And as soon as the weather starts changing and that external environment becomes tougher, internally it becomes harder too. And for me, I would get this frustration and honestly anger towards people that made it harder for me to get there. And I struggled with that pretty much throughout the first trip. I tried to work through it, but it still kept coming back. And I often felt as though I was in this mental prison. I remember then I came back from that trip actually in a little bit of debt, managed to sponsor for the second trip, back to work, got unpaid leave from the army and went straight back out. And when I look back, I don't think I had fully recovered from the first trip. And then the second one was actually a nightmare due to some of my own mistakes as well. But mentally, that trip really tested me. It kind of broke me apart. And I'm in the same headspace. I'm still in that low headspace. So it's not, I'm not extra special at all. I have all of those doubts, those fears. On that 70-day trip, I had a little voice in my head telling me you failed quite a lot. And of course, you're right. I don't have internet. I'm not, I'm not, I'm checking in on my satellite phone, but I'm thinking that's what people are thinking when they're watching my little dot online, like move really slowly, that I'm going to fail this trip. And it was really hard to move away from that. And then my third trip was physically easier. And because it wasn't as far, so I had a lighter sled. So I mentally would go back to the harder trip and think, if you've done that, you can do this. I think it was traumatic growth, I would say, after the second trip. And now my learnings from that, it is so powerful to spend time on your own. I won't say it's easy to do because, it was hard, especially moving into the difficulty of the first trip and the second trip. I don't think I realized how much frustration and anger I had inside me, because back at home, what do you do in those situations? You distract yourself, you go for a run, go to the gym, talk to friends, watch something. And now I'm in a place without the distractions. And I would listen to audiobooks, but I still struggled to get away from them. And I remember thinking to myself, have I just, distracted myself from these issues? Have I not dealt with them? And, you have to be in the right place to deal with them as well. But coming through that was incredibly powerful. I feel so much more comfortable with myself now, just in a way, like I'll talk about my mistakes a lot. And I don't know if I would have been that comfortable to do so before my first trip. Whereas now, I think I've learned so much from my mistakes. I've learned way more from my failures than I have my successes. And actually, for me, if I point my mistakes out, I can then learn from them. If I don't take accountability for them, how am I going to change anything?
There was one thing I learned myself. The only time I have had complete solitude is I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat. So it's just, you're just on your own. And I was really angry as well. And I couldn't work out why. And I was like, wow, this is really odd. But I feel like solitude, it almost reveals what you're feeling when you're not distracted.
Yes.
What do you think at that time you were frustrated and angry about?
For me personally, it was towards people, specific people who had made it so much harder, not just for me to get there, but loads of things. Even in the past, I was told I wasn't smart enough to get into university. I got into university, and at each stage, it felt like there were these individuals who were, trying to hold me back or telling me I wasn't good enough, trying to keep me inside this box. And even for Antarctica, it was so hard anyway. You do not need people making it harder, and that really frustrated me. And I remember after my first trip getting some messages, and people will lie. Those people like would then say how much they've supported you, and that just like the rage that came out of me then. And I had to step away from it. I was like, I cannot be letting this drain me, because that mental prison was really hard. That's the most I've suffered from it. You're alone. You just cannot get away from these voices in your head. It's making my sled heavier. It's making every single day harder. And in the past, I used to have this attitude of, I'm going to prove them wrong. I got into university. I then got a master's. I, now get honorary doctorates and so on. Like I've done this, but I didn't want Antarctica to be about that. I haven't come all the way to Antarctica out of spite. That is a very long way to go. And it wasn't about those people. So I think I had to reframe that a little bit on my mind. I also blocked some people on WhatsApp, which was very, very, very healthy for me to do. Because let's face it, not everybody has your best interests at heart. Not everybody wants you to succeed. And, that's okay. That's their opinion and whatnot. But for me, I find it helpful to put that block there. And I felt like a cloud was lifted off me. That's not to say sometimes I just still don't get frustrated, but I try to think about why now. What is it that's actually frustrating me? And it might be that I'm just overwhelmed. And I do that myself. I overwhelm myself because I want to do so many different things. So sometimes I'll take a minute and I'll say, okay, you need to, figure out what this is, because it's not going to help me going forward.
It's incredible to see, because you're such a bubbly and smiley character. Like, just in the short time that we've been speaking to each other, it's like, wow.
Not on the inside. No, I'm joking.
This is where that's kind of where I was like, I felt like I could relate in a way, because like when you speak about this like anger and how that like can drive you and how it's like pushing you to like prove people wrong and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, I see that in you, because I feel like I see it in myself as well, where you're like really happy and easygoing, but like on the inside, you're like trying to prove something. And I've seen as well on your socials, like you not only choose loads of adversity through the expeditions, but you also face so much of it with like people mocking you trying to learn Punjabi and these other seemingly like unrelated things to your expeditions. Or like, you know, people not looking like you when you're joining the army and all things like this. Do you feel like there is that inner side of you being like, I've got something to prove?
Probably, hopefully still not as much. And the reason I share more of the negatives now, because I want the other people, the younger versions of me, to see that and see, oh no, she's getting it too, and she's still learning. I will, like, there's some things in Punjabi I've said wrong and I've still posted it and then shown myself talking to my grandma who's correcting the way I say it, because it is okay to show your mistakes. Everybody, when they are learning, makes mistakes. I remember my first, and I still fall when I'm skiing in Antarctica on my sled, but I remember my first trip, and I'm basically walking on skis, dragging a sled, and I fell so many times. And I remember thinking, man, those old age explorers are probably like looking at me from up there thinking, who have they let onto the continent? You make mistakes, but the beauty of it is like, look how far you can come. And that's why I want to share it. So I don't feel as much that, oh, I need to prove something. I do think, I can't say it's gone completely. 100% is still in there, probably like deep rooted. But, and I know, it's having this conversation with yourself as well, because I know I don't need to. I know I would tell somebody else, look at what you've achieved. You do not need to prove anything to anybody. But then the other side, that competitive side of me, still wants to prove, still wants to, be like, show that we can be in every space, in every room, and just, be the best version of ourselves.
Who are you trying to prove that to?
I don't know if it's to myself or probably other people who made me feel really small. But again, what I would say to that is, you're never going to get the reaction you want. So I don't try to anymore. Whereas I think there were times in the past where I would have thought, look what I've done, and almost played out the interaction in my head. This is what I will say to that person if I ever see them. But you're never going to get the reaction you want. Most people probably wouldn't even admit it. So why waste your time, your energy? It drains you. It drains me when I'm on the ice. So I try not to anymore. And if I do get into that mindset, because it's not that, oh, I've evolved so much where I feel completely fine now. In life, you'll have ups and downs. So even though I feel much more confident in myself, when things aren't going to plan, I will still have those downs. I will still have the self-doubt, and then I dip back into it. I will still sometimes read negative comments online and they bother me more than I want them to. But then I have to think back, okay, Preet, you're probably not in a good space right now. What's going on? What is it that's actually bothering you? And it's, it's something else. And I come back to it, because I can then come back to those comments. I'm in a good place and kind of just laugh it off. It's not a big deal.
I think that there's definitely this kind of view on negative emotions now, like in 1966 quote marks, because like things like anger are seen as like bad, something that's bad, that you shouldn't have it. Whereas, do you feel like anger has a place to kind of like get you out of a situation, or to like keep you like a negative motivation almost, that like you're yeah.
I think it's okay to be angry. I mean, I'm pretty honest about it, because actually I should be angry at, why are people trying to put me in a spot? Why are people telling me I can't do stuff? I want to be angry at that. So I think, yeah, like, be angry at those people. I'm not saying you have to, focus on it completely, but, maybe it's find a different circle. Maybe not everybody in your circle is, going to help you. So I think it's okay to be angry at it. I just don't think it's necessarily healthy to have that overriding anger. Because I think that was not helping me. And I realized that, this is actually in a place that's not helping me. If it is helping you, great. I just wouldn't want it to be the main emotion fueling you, because then let's say you achieve whatever it is. If it was just out of anger and spite, I don't think that's going to help. I don't think at the end of whatever you achieve and whatever you do, it's going to be helpful.
And I noticed in the expeditions that you're going on, they're like grueling. And I was watching the videos of you going through it, and you give your updates in the tent. You can see your energy just depleting day by day. And it's like, oh my God, it's so visible that you're like giving it everything, and you can keep going even when you're not motivated. Whereas there are other expeditions in the world where they genuinely look like they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough and everything. Whereas yours seem quite unique in that it almost seems like it's just tough. Um, how do you get yourself to accomplish these kind of feats?
That's a really good question. So my first trip to the South Pole, I definitely enjoyed parts of it. There were parts of it where I looked around and thought, this is amazing. My second trip, the 70 days, I did not enjoy a single day. It was actually hell, and it got worse and worse. It was, because I'm going to talk about that, because I didn't enjoy any of it. I didn't enjoy any of it. I didn't make it to my end goal. I failed to reach my goal. And again, not in a negative way, but I would 100% do that whole trip again, knowing I didn't reach my goal. Why? Because I learned so much from it. It is so good to fail. And especially when I thought I'd succeed. I'd done this whole big first trip in preparation, one that I wasn't expecting to do. So I thought I had it down. I was crossing the landmass. It's just over 1,000 miles. I didn't think I was going too high, but something I thought I could achieve. So, and it was hard to go through that. And as somebody who I think, one of my strengths is probably mental resilience. I don't think I've been in a position before where I thought, I don't think I can keep going. And I was in that position where I thought, I genuinely don't think I can keep going. And I was definitely burnt out. I don't think, we should all necessarily go to that, because then it took me the year to recover. Like, the more burnt out you are, it took me a long time to recover. But I learned so much from it. I came, not immediately, I came out struggling, and I struggled for a lot of the year, had to have surgery on my leg for an injury. And then I was so exhausted, I couldn't even do much physical movement. I'd walk outside for 30, 40 seconds a minute, and I'd feel breathless. And that really bothered me. And I bought myself a coloring book. I binge watched Netflix. I'm so impatient with myself. I wanted the fix, and I couldn't get the fix. So even after the trip, I really struggled with it. But I go back to that trip often mentally. I got a speed record my third trip. The only reason I think I got that, because there's no way I'm the fastest skier, the only reason I got that is because I think of this failure of the second trip, because I learned so much from it. And when the third trip got hard, I think to myself, well, it's not as bad as the second one. So, no part of it was, and it got hard, but it actually went pretty smooth. I made a lot of mistakes on my second trip. I wrote my mistakes down in the notes of my phone. I looked back at them. What did I do wrong? Some were really silly mistakes. I should have known better, but let's learn from them. Let's learn from them and do better the next time. And then I had one of the smoothest trips. So that suffering or the hardship, you can learn from those. And let's think about anything you do that is hard and it's outside of your comfort zone. Like, some people might do trips, and of course there's sections of it they enjoy, but there'll be tough sections too. Those sections are outside of your comfort zone. They're not comfortable. They're not supposed to be. The more you go outside of that, probably harder physically and mentally. Think back to those moments and what you took from those moments. There's something in there that's, for me, that's where my resilience comes from being in those moments. Ever since I was younger, joined the army, dug a hole, lived in that hole. It wasn't fun. It was kind of miserable, although that was shared misery, which was more fun than like being miserable on your own. But, you learn from it, you take something from it. I genuinely get strength looking back at those moments, thinking, man, I didn't get the physical result that I wanted, but mentally I took a lot from that trip. And that is the one I come back to over and over again. Can I do this next hard thing? Well, I've been in a situation that was really tough, so probably.
So can we do that with your experience on that second trip? What was the specific moment that you found particularly hard, and what did you take away from it?
So many moments. So in the first couple of days, I was so scared about failing this trip. So I have the kind of edges of the season. So I only had 70 days. I'm dropped off on the ice. So I start like, I push straight away because I could camp where the plane dropped me off and start the next day. But I don't have much time and I have to get going. So I push hard immediately. I had some rough weather kind of at the start, but I kept pushing. And rather than sticking to 10 to 12 hours, I was like 14 hours first day, 15 hours second day, 16 hours. Really silly, actually. But in my mind, because I hadn't moved much that first day, I was like, oh, I will go back to routine when I, start making the mileage. And of course I didn't. What happened? My sleep's all over the place. I basically dug a hole at the start of that trip and I couldn't get out of it. And I just dug deeper and deeper. So I fell in deeper and deeper. I strained my neck a couple of days in. So then I start using my pain relief, which I didn't think I would start using at the start of the trip. So then I'm rationing my pain relief. Last 14 days, I had 1 tablet of codeine left in my top left pocket. The neck was, and then I had another injury on my left calf called polar thigh, cold injury. So I was managing that as well. The last 14 days, I started skiing for 24 hours a day because I thought, if I could make it, I've got 24 hours of daylight. I was physically lifting my head up with my ski poles. I was falling like 14 times every 2 hours. And mistakes wise, the neck was 100% self-inflicted. It was completely my error. I pushed hard. Yeah, I've got a headwind. I'm looking down at my compass. I should have stopped. And even when I did strain my neck, even if I'd rested for a day, it'd probably be better. But I couldn't, I couldn't stop because I'm so scared of failing this trip. The leg, I don't really know if I could have prevented, if I'm honest with you. But again, that was another bit of extra admin. And I remember my stove, my MSR stove, like being on low and I'm not getting much kind of fire from it. And I just needed to take it apart and fix it. But I'm so low on energy, I just can't do it. So instead, I've got this like low flame. And then I'm just having kind of lukewarm water instead. One day I forgot to close my thermos properly. And I'm making these mistakes because I'm exhausted. So when you're cooking, you have water from your thermos that you put in the kettle just a little bit before you put snow in it, and it stops you from burning the bottom. Because I hadn't closed my thermos properly, it was a block of ice. I remember looking at it thinking, you've got to be kidding me. So then I got the other side of my spoon, I started stabbing flecks of ice. And obviously I burnt the bottle of the kettle at the bottom because you would of the pot. So I had specks of ice, and I just started putting snow in it and burnt the bottom. But I made so many mistakes like that. It kept getting more and more because I was making mistakes because I was so tired. I had 70 days of food for a 70-day trip, but because I was always skiing for more than 12 hours a day, I was using more of my snack food, which meant I started running out of my snack food. So in the evening, I'd have freeze-dried food, dehydrated meals, and in the day, I'd have my trail mix, basically, like nuts, chocolates, raisins, etc., flapjacks. And I started to run a lot of those. So then I'm rationing that, and of course, I'm losing weight anyway. And then I was so hungry. So I'm low on energy. I remember thinking towards the end of that trip, is it this bad or is it just me? And I think it was a combination of both. But, I'm making way more mistakes because I made some at the start. I didn't stop and fix them, and they've just gotten worse.
Oh, okay, yeah. So then it like downward spirals from there.
100%.
And on failure as well, I know that you're a big proponent for sort of learning from failure, not to shy away from it. And I noticed that once you'd done all these amazing achievements and you had your reputation as well for being, Polar Preet and someone that has done these incredible feats, you then went on to tackle the North Pole, but you didn't manage to raise the funds, right, for that expedition. What happened with that one?
Oh man, the North Pole is something else completely. So, and I'm going to tell you this because this is something I learned as well. So, the South Pole is on the continent Antarctica. The North Pole, the geographic North Pole, actually sits in the middle of the sea, and there currently aren't any logistics to pick you up. So, I knew I could never actually make it to the North Pole because there's no logistics. Even if the logistics were in place, like it's so hard. I just wanted to try and get to the start line because I think having failed something quite big before, I was very much in the mindset of go fail. Even if there's like 1% chance of making it, go fail. So I thought, I just want to try and get as far north as I can. So I was trying to raise funds to get dropped off at the edge of the landmass in Canada. So even if I would do 50 miles out, turn around and come back, that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't get the funds, and nowhere near actually the funds. And I'll be honest, it wasn't a great start the way I did it, because I think in my mind, I just thought, keep pushing, you'll get the funding. And I didn't. So it was very messy if I look back at it. And again, learning from my mistakes, I probably shouldn't have been there with all of my gear ready to go when I had it nowhere near the funding. But I think I was hoping for like that last minute miracle and thought I could get it. So instead, I did a slightly different trip in the Arctic, not as far, nowhere near as far north. And that was my first, solo Arctic trip. And it's funny, I didn't cover anywhere near as much mileage as any of my Antarctic trips. I think it was around 340 roughly in 40 days. I was on sea ice, but I wasn't far from land. So I wasn't kind of that far off. And it was harder than anything I've done before. Everything about it, sorry.
It really shocked me that you didn't get the funding, because I thought, like, of anyone to back to go and do that, it would have been you. Like, you had the evidence that you could definitely give it a good crack and that you probably would do it. Why do you think that you didn't get the funding?
So it's funny because a lot of people will say to me, of course you will get the funding, or they'll say it must be easy for you. It has never been easy. It is always so hard. And I've been thinking back about what is it I need to change. And funny enough, this year, I've been thinking, okay, Preet, you need to work on your branding a little bit, because a couple of people, I've been asking for advice this year, and a couple of people have said that to me, where's your branding? So I thought, okay, let's take a step back, because what is it I'm missing? Because of course I'm missing something, it doesn't just, so I've been working on that this year. So I 100% will go back and try, but I won't do what I did last time. I won't go to Arctic Canada to try and start a trip that I don't have the funding to start. I'm happy still to go and try, even if I know, you 100% can't make it to the North Pole, because I do think it's worth going anyway and seeing how far north I can get. And also there's that beauty in, going and failing, and, having been to the South Pole, trying to get to the North Pole. Great. Like, why not? It's, so I 100% will try. I just don't know when, because it's so different. In Antarctica, I think back, I had it so much easier. I use a logistics company. I know how much sponsorship I need because they tell me. So yes, fine, I need to work out a bit extra for gear and getting to Chile. But after that, they take me onto the continent. They, pick me up from the continent. Whereas the Arctic is so different. There's currently not a logistics company. So even not really knowing how much it's going to cost is something else. And having to charter a plane to drop you off at the start line, it's just a different world. And then the sea ice. I mean, I haven't been that far north. And I know from having spoken to people who have been there that it's one of the hardest conditions they've ever been in. And this is, people with way more experience than I have. And even where I was like, this is so hard, because this humidity from the sea ice. And it was, I think, around -40 around nights when I started my trip. And it'd be much colder further north. And it was just brutal. In Antarctica, it's dry, windy, cold. I've got 24 hours of daylight. Here I had some darkness, and you're cooking inside your tent. It's so cold. I've got polar bear footprints everywhere. Everything in your gear is heavier. You're having to carry the firearm, your polar bear fence. Any bit of down you've got gets wet and heavy very, very quickly. So in Antarctica, I'd cook in my porch. In the Arctic, I'm cooking inside the tent itself. There's just every single thing is harder. Like, there's not, every single part, logistics, physically, mentally, it just, it was hard, that trip. And I think I'm really glad I did it. And I needed so much more help. I thought, oh, I've got this experience, but part of me, even when training, I felt like a child. out there. I was like, I'm making mistakes. I'm not moving smoothly. Whereas, in Antarctica, I feel much more comfortable, especially now. And my last trip I did, about how I'm organizing my gear and just going. Whereas here, just even, managing the moisture in my goggles, I'm like, it just, I was faffing way more than I'd want to. So I wouldn't say it was a good trip. However, I don't, I would learn from that. So I don't take that as a negative. It was a hard trip. And I made a lot of mistakes. Like it didn't ever feel smooth. I didn't feel like I ever got into a groove at all in it. And I didn't even cover, I'm not putting myself down here, but what I'm trying to say is I did so much less mileage than I have ever in Antarctica or even thought I would do. Yeah, it was still harder. So then if I want to go further north, I need to be much, much more comfortable in those conditions and stronger, and just, how do I limit that faff again and manage the moisture? It was a very challenging trip.
Why you? I've had this question in my mind throughout our conversation, because talking about all the feats that you've accomplished and getting to know a bit of your mindset and what's driving that as well, it makes me think that you had all the odds stacked against you, right? From like your upbringing or like what religion you're born into and whatever it is. Like it seems like if there was anyone to be like world-class explorer, like it probably wasn't going to be you. You had all the odds stacked against you from such a young age. So the fact that you've gone and done that, it kind of makes the accomplishments even more incredible. Like it's like, there's like an and. It's like, yeah, went to the South Pole and, done all this stuff, first woman, and all this kind of backing that comes with it. So why do you think that you were able to go on and live the life that you have?
I think there's, for as long as I can remember, there's been this fire inside me. So I've got two older brothers, and even growing up, I wanted to do what they were doing. And, but I wanted to beat them. They're older than me. So I had that competitive nature as a kid. But I think and it's funny, my mum, who had an arranged marriage at 17, she actually told me that she was a rebellious one as well, but she didn't have anywhere near the choices and opportunities I've had. So it's almost, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but she walked so I could run. Like she broke boundaries I would never see. I would never have had to face. So it has allowed me to break to the world. We'll see as much bigger boundaries, but actually they're not. They're not bigger. They're just different. But I've had that opportunities because she broke her boundaries. So my mum got divorced, which was a huge deal, like a very, very big deal when I was about 10, in the community. It was a very big deal. I remember that. And I'm so proud of her for doing that and, pushing, even when most people didn't really stand by her. So I think for me, I joined the army part-time and was told by certain family members that, I couldn't and I had to leave. And I stayed in because it gave me this freedom. It's funny, isn't it? I find that funny to say. I joined the army to give me freedom. A different world opened up to me that I didn't know about. I had the opportunity to play sport when I was younger, which she never would have. I played, which may seem, oh, that's the norm, but me and my brothers would have been the first ones. I started playing tennis, I think, when I was about 10. So even having like those opportunities and then I started to play quite a lot. And funny enough, through tennis, I remember beating girls who were better than me because I would hack, I'd loop the ball. I was a very annoying person to play against. And they would eventually, and I'd just keep getting it back. And then they'd eventually miss. And then I would quickly get the other points because their head was down. And then by that point, I won the game, I won the next game. And then their head's back in the game. But I'm already like a few games ahead. So it was very hard for them to catch up. So I remember realizing, I think at a younger age, that mentally I have this like mental strength. And, I've carried that through with me. I managed to get a female speed record in skiing when there's no way I'm the best or efficient skier, not by any chance. But you don't need to be the best to succeed. And, there are other strengths I have that I can use. So yes, there are boundaries, and hopefully, whoever comes next in that next generation, I really hope that I can make it a little bit easier. I make the effort to speak to people who, do want to go to Antarctica, and if there's anything I can do to help, and people who are trying to get the speed record. And I remember they said to me, like someone said, "Oh, are you hoping that I secretly, or that they secretly don't get it?" I said, "Not really, because I don't need to hold on to it. This isn't something I dreamt of as a little kid, or that I need to hold. And also, what does it say about me if I then hold that record? I don't think it says anything positive. Am I not helping the next person get it? And it's beatable. Of course it's beatable. Otherwise, how did somebody like me get it? I'm not some elite skier at all. So if I can get it, 100% somebody can beat it. So, I hope that whoever, just go for it next, I can help them in any way, or cheer them on at least, because, it's a community of people. And there are still people out there who are facing, bigger boundaries and barriers. And I often say to people, what's your Antarctica? What's your South Pole? Because everybody has something different. I still get people come to me and say, I did this, but it's nowhere near as big as what you did. And I always want to take the second part out, because it's all big. It's all huge. My mum was 59 last year, and we climbed Snowdon. My mum, who walks on the pavements in Derby, and it hadn't been on a mountain till the year before, because I took her the year before. On the Llanberis route, you follow the railway line up, and it was hard work for her. And it was like a really hot day. We did it last year as well, and she did it. I was proud of her, but more importantly, she was so proud of herself. Never in her life would she have thought she would climb a mountain, ever. And we went shopping for everything. We bought her boots, we bought her, non-cotton t-shirt, like things that you wouldn't know, because why would she know that? So everybody has different boundaries, and hopefully, we can help the people around us, break their boundaries too. And I think that's part of my drive as well. I wanted to show someone like me in this space, who didn't know anything about this world, who, has made those silly mistakes, or was scared that I might look stupid. I mean, at the start, when people said to me, were you inspired by Shackleton, Amundsen and Scott? I would say yes. And I didn't know who they were, but I wanted to look like I came from the right background. And then, you learn a bit more. And I think, well, there isn't necessarily a right background, and there's different pathways into this. So it's, be scared. Don't believe in yourself. Don't be motivated. Do it anyway.
Wow. Okay. So for people listening at the moment who are like psyched, and they're like really feeling like actually this could be something for them to go and do something over on a weekend, or go do as a career, or go and follow in your footsteps and go and do amazing things and adventurous feats of endurance. I think a lot of people will probably be thinking about where to start. And you mentioned about a few barriers you're facing right now with things like branding and stuff like that. But for someone who's right at the start and they don't know where to start, then where do they start?
Honestly, your first step can be absolutely anything. So the beauty, I think, online is there's so much access to. So whether it's typing it online, social media, if it's Antarctica, literally ping me a message, on Instagram, and often people do, and we'll set up a call, and I'll speak to them. But even if you want to do something outdoors and you really don't know where to start, honestly, start small. So I have some huge goals, and often I'll start really, really small. So if you're not sure, that could just be going out locally, or going to like streets in your city centre that you haven't been down before, and going without, let's say you're like not sure about maps or where to go, getting a map and doing it on a map rather than using your phone. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing. I first started using a map when I was in the army, and then in a compass, and then in Antarctica they use GPS and latitude and longitude. I didn't know anything about latitude and longitude, and I was like, how do you even describe what that is? Because it's just something that was a little bit unknown to me. So don't be afraid of what you don't know. You keep it simple, stupid. Kiss.
Awesome. Preet, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks very much.